I used to believe that my marriage was solid, built on love, trust, and mutual respect. I thought my wife, Laura, and I had the kind of relationship that people envied, a stable foundation, a deep bond that had been strengthened over the years. We had been married for 12 years, together for 15. Our life together was full of the usual ups and downs, but through it all, I always believed we were a team. I never imagined that the person I trusted most in the world would be capable of betraying me in the most devastating way. Laura and I met in our late 20s. We were both at a friend's wedding, making small talk over mediocre champagne, and I was drawn to her instantly. She had this effortless charm, a contagious laugh, and a way of making even the most mundane conversation feel interesting. We started dating shortly after, and within a couple of years, we were married. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to think that love alone would be enough to shield us from the inevitable decay of time and temptation. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I truly believed it was strong. We had built a comfortable life together. I had a stable career in finance, while Laura worked in marketing. We had a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, weekend getaways, dinner parties with friends. On the surface, it was the picture of a happy, successful marriage. But now, in hindsight, I see that there were cracks forming long before I ever realized it. Laura had always been adventurous, someone who thrived on excitement. She loved to travel, loved the feeling of stepping into a new place and breathing in the unfamiliar air. I, on the other hand, was more grounded. I liked the idea of traveling, but work always kept me busy, and truthfully, I was content with our life at home. Maybe that's where it all started to go wrong. She had an insatiable hunger for new experiences, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being enough. It was early in the summer when Laura brought up the idea of a vacation. She and a few of her old college friends had been talking about going on a trip together, somewhere tropical, somewhere they could unwind and recharge. I encouraged her to go. I never thought twice about it. She had traveled without me before, and I had never been the jealous type. I trusted her completely. That trust would be my downfall. The weeks leading up to her trip passed in a blur. Work was demanding, as usual, and Laura was busy making plans. She seemed excited, more than usual, and I chalked it up to her love of traveling. I didn't know it at the time, but I was unknowingly watching my marriage unravel right in front of me. Laura left for her vacation on a Wednesday morning. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have fun. She smiled, told me she loved me, and walked away. I had no idea that when she boarded that plane, she was also leaving behind the life we had built together. After Laura left for her vacation, I settled into my usual routine. Work kept me busy, and in the evenings, I found solace in the small, familiar rituals of our home. Cooking simple meals, watching TV, occasionally texting her to check in. It all felt normal. But looking back now, I realize how little I actually knew about what was happening on the other side of the world. At first, her messages were frequent. She sent me pictures of the beach, of the local food, of the resort where she and her friends were staying. She seemed happy, energized. I felt a pang of regret for not going with her. Maybe I should have taken time off, joined her, been a part of those memories. But I dismissed the thought just as quickly. She needed this, I told myself. A break. A chance to unwind. But as the days passed, something shifted. The messages became shorter, less detailed. Where she had initially been eager to share stories, she now responded with simple replies. Having fun. Talk soon. Or super busy today. Love you. Brief, almost dismissive. Calls became rare. When I did manage to catch her on the phone, she sounded distracted, her voice distant, as if her mind was elsewhere. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just caught up in the excitement of the trip. Maybe she was simply enjoying herself too much to check in as often. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who questioned his wife's freedom. I had always believed that trust was the foundation of our marriage, and I wasn't going to let my insecurities get the best of me. And yet, there were things I couldn't ignore. One night, I stayed up late working on a report for an important client. It was close to midnight when I glanced at my phone and saw that Laura had posted a story on social media. It was a short clip, her at a beachside bar, music blasting in the background, colorful lights illuminating the scene. She was laughing, drink in hand, her arm draped around someone just outside the frame. I rewatched it, trying to make sense of the unease creeping into my gut. Something felt off. I clicked on the profiles of the friends she had gone on the trip with, scrolling through their posts, trying to piece together a clearer picture of what she had been up to. But there weren't many pictures of her. In fact, she barely appeared in any of their updates. It struck me as strange. Laura loved taking photos, loved capturing every little moment of a trip. Why was she suddenly absent? I pushed the thoughts away, convincing myself I was overthinking. But the feeling lingered, a nagging sense of doubt that refused to let go. The next morning, I texted her, asking how her night had been. It took hours for her to respond. "Oh, we just went out for a bit. Nothing crazy. Miss you." Something about it felt rehearsed. That evening, I tried calling her. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind. Was she hiding something? I shook my head, frustrated with myself. Laura would never do that to me. She loved me. She had always been loyal, always been the woman I could count on. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And I had no idea that soon, I wouldn't need to wonder. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. By the 5th day of Laura's trip, something inside me had shifted. What started as a vague unease had now settled into a constant, gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just that she was slow to respond to my texts or that our calls had dwindled to almost nothing. It was the way she felt completely unreachable, like she was slipping away from me in real time. I had never been the kind of husband to check up on my wife constantly or demand reassurance. But there was something different about this trip, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The silence between us felt intentional, like she was creating distance on purpose, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. At first, I tried to be rational. Laura was on vacation. She was with her friends, in a different country, enjoying herself, and I didn't want to be the kind of husband who made her feel guilty for having fun. Maybe she was just wrapped up in the moment, busy with activities, and simply didn't have the time to text me every hour. But even as I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the growing sense that she wasn't just busy, she was avoiding me. Her messages were short, dismissive even, lacking the warmth and affection I had come to expect from her. Where she once would have told me about every little detail of her day, now she barely gave me anything. Having fun. Talk soon. Or super busy today. Love you. Messages that felt hollow, like something she was sending out of obligation rather than genuine connection. I wanted to ignore it, to push away the doubts creeping into my mind. But then I saw something that I couldn't dismiss. Late at night, while lying in bed, I scrolled through social media, searching for any trace of Laura's trip. She hadn't posted much herself, but her friends had been sharing updates, a few pictures of the beach, some group shots at restaurants. That's when I came across an image that stopped me cold. It was a simple dinner photo, taken at an upscale restaurant, the caption cheerful and generic. But as I looked closer, my stomach twisted into knots. There were 5 wine glasses on the table, 5 plates of food, but only 4 people in the frame. Someone had been sitting there, just outside the picture, deliberately avoiding being seen. A strange sense of dread settled over me. My rational mind told me it could have been anyone. Maybe another friend. Maybe even a stranger who left before the picture was taken. But my instincts were screaming something else entirely. I scrolled down to the comments, reading through the usual playful banter, and that's when I saw it. A message from someone I didn't recognize. Nothing but a winking face, a heart, and a smirking emoji. It didn't belong under a casual vacation post. It wasn't something you'd expect under a picture shared by a group of married women on a trip. It had a different meaning, one that made my skin crawl. I checked Laura's profile again, searching for any sign of something I had missed. Normally, she would tag me in her posts, share inside jokes with me, send me pictures privately just for us. But this time, there was nothing. She was keeping me separate from this trip, whether consciously or not. And that realization settled over me like a weight I couldn't shake off. I called her, my hands clammy as I held the phone to my ear. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen, my mind racing through every possible reason she wouldn't pick up. Maybe she was sleeping, maybe she left her phone in the hotel room. Maybe the service was bad. But deep down, I knew none of those explanations felt right. She was avoiding me. There was no other way to look at it. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was overreacting, that Laura would never do something like this to me. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that made my chest tighten with something dangerously close to panic. I had no proof of anything yet, but for the first time since she left, I truly believed that my wife was keeping something from me. And I had no idea how much worse the truth was going to be. The morning after those missed calls, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years: dread. It settled deep in my stomach, a weight I couldn't shake, pressing down on me as I got ready for the day. My first instinct was to check my phone, hoping for a message from Laura that would make everything feel normal again. But there was nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no explanation for why she hadn't answered me the night before. It was as if I didn't exist to her, and that realization sent a chill through me. I tried to go about my routine as usual, throwing myself into work, pretending that everything was fine. But I kept checking my phone, waiting for something, anything, to give me clarity. Hours passed before she finally responded, and when I saw her message, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. "Hey, sorry I missed your calls. We were out last night, and I didn't hear my phone. Having an amazing time. Wish you were here. Love you." It was so casual, so dismissive, as if she hadn't completely ignored me the night before. Something about it felt rehearsed, carefully worded in a way that didn't invite further questions. I wanted to believe her, but the more I read it, the more it felt like she was keeping me at arm's length, like she was saying just enough to keep me from pressing too hard. That night, I barely slept. The same thoughts kept looping in my mind. Who was she with? Who had been sitting at that dinner table just outside the frame? Why had she ignored my calls? I hated feeling like this, hated the way doubt was poisoning my mind, but I couldn't turn it off. The more I tried to suppress it, the louder it became. The next day, I tried calling her again. No answer. I told myself I wouldn't read into it, but when I checked my phone an hour later, I saw that she had posted another story on social media, laughing at a beach bar, drink in hand, surrounded by people. She was having the time of her life, and I wasn't even a thought in her mind. The realization hit me like a slap. I stared at the screen, analyzing every detail. There was movement in the background, blurred figures of people dancing, but one person stood out, a man, sitting close beside her, his arm resting casually on the back of her chair. His face wasn't visible, but the body language was unmistakable. It was intimate, comfortable, too familiar. My heart started pounding as I zoomed in, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it just a friend? A stranger? Was I reading too much into this? But deep down, I knew. I knew because I had been with Laura for 15 years, and I had never once seen her look so carefree, so happy, so completely unburdened when she was with me. I needed answers. I wasn't going to sit here and let my mind play tricks on me. So I did something I had never done before. I reached out to one of her friends. I kept it casual at first, asking how the trip was going, pretending like everything was fine. Her responses were polite but vague, as if she was being careful about what she said. I asked if Laura was around, if she could pass her the phone so we could talk for a bit. There was a pause before the reply came. "She's out right now. I think she left her phone at the hotel. I'll tell her to call you when she gets back." Another excuse. Another delay. My hands clenched into fists as I stared at the screen, realizing that I was being lied to. Laura hadn't left her phone at the hotel. She had just posted on social media less than an hour ago. So why was her friend covering for her? A cold, unsettling clarity washed over me. She wasn't just busy. She wasn't just distracted. She was actively avoiding me, and now, other people were involved in keeping me in the dark. The trust one had held onto so tightly was crumbling, and I felt something inside me harden in response. That night, I stopped texting her. I stopped calling. I stopped waiting for her to give me the truth, because I already knew. I didn't need her to say it. Laura was cheating on me. She was in another country, in someone else's arms, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For the first time in my marriage, I felt truly alone. I went through the next day in a daze, functioning on autopilot as the weight of realization settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Laura had made her choice. She was in another country, in someone else's arms, and I was thousands of miles away, powerless to stop any of it. There was a time when I would have dismissed the thought as paranoia, but now, the truth sat before me, undeniable and brutal. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was betraying me, and I had no way of knowing just how far it had gone. I didn't call her. I didn't text. The previous night had made one thing clear. She didn't want to talk to me, and I wasn't going to beg for scraps of her attention. But as the hours passed, something shifted inside me. The sadness, the confusion, the desperate need to understand. It all began to harden into something else. Anger. I had been patient, trusting, supportive, and this was how she repaid me? By shutting me out while she wrapped herself up in someone else? I had never been the jealous type, never the kind of man to suffocate my wife with suspicion, and she had used that against me. That evening, I logged into our shared phone account, something I had never done before. We had nothing to hide from each other, or at least, that's what I had believed. But now, I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them from her. My heart pounded as I navigated through the call logs, scrolling past the usual numbers, mine, her family's, a few coworkers, until I saw it. A number I didn't recognize. Over and over again. Late at night, early in the morning, spaced throughout the days since she had left. Some of the calls lasted minutes. Others, much longer. I copied the number and ran a quick search. No name came up, just a generic result. But I didn't need confirmation. I already knew who it belonged to. My wife had been talking to another man throughout the entire trip. I gripped the edges of my desk, trying to steady myself, but the room felt like it was closing in around me. My mind raced through every possibility, every awful detail that I had tried to push away. Had it started before the trip? Had she planned this from the beginning? Was he a stranger she had met there? Or had he been in her life for longer than I realized? The thought made my stomach turn, because the longer I stared at those call logs, the more I realized the truth. I wasn't just losing my wife. I had already lost her. For the first time since she had left, Laura called me that night. My phone vibrated on the table, her name lighting up the screen, but I didn't answer. I just watched it ring, watched the seconds count down, until it stopped. A moment later, a text appeared. Hey, I feel like we haven't talked much. Miss you. Let's call soon. Okay? A perfect lie, dressed up as concern. The same Laura I had known for 15 years, playing her part so flawlessly that, for a second, I almost believed her. Almost. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. Because I wasn't going to confront her over the phone. I wasn't going to argue with a woman who had already decided to betray me. I was going to wait. I was going to let her enjoy her vacation, let her live in the fantasy she had created for herself. And then, when she came home, she was going to face the consequences of what she had done. For now, I let her think I was still the trusting husband, oblivious and patient. But in reality, I was counting down the days. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I barely slept that night, lying awake in the darkness with my phone in my hand, staring at the unanswered text from Laura. Hey, I feel like we haven't talked much. Miss you. Let's call soon. Okay? I reread it over and over, dissecting every word, feeling my anger grow with each passing second. It was a carefully crafted message, just enough warmth to keep me pacified, just vague enough to avoid any real explanation. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was doing it to keep up appearances, to keep me in the dark while she continued living this double life. I could picture her now, lounging in some sun-soaked resort, drink in hand, laughing at some joke from the man she had been sneaking away to call. I imagined them together at night, his hands where only mine should have been, her lips pressed against his as if the life she had built with me never existed. I wondered if she thought of me at all, if there was even the slightest trace of guilt in her mind when she sent that message, or if I had already been erased from her world completely. The worst part was, I still didn't know the full extent of her betrayal. The phone calls told me plenty, but they didn't give me the whole picture. Had she met him before the trip? Had they been talking for weeks? Months? Had I been sleeping next to a woman who was already planning to leave me in her heart long before she stepped on that plane? The thought made me feel sick. I had to know more. I logged into our shared phone account again, searching through the text logs this time. My heart pounded as I scrolled past familiar numbers, past conversations with her coworkers and friends, until I saw it. The same number from the call logs, appearing again and again. My hands trembled as I counted the messages, dozens of them, spread across the days and nights. But when I checked her phone bill, my stomach dropped. Some of those messages were marked as deleted before delivery. She had sent something, then erased it before it ever reached the server. A failsafe, in case I ever checked. Laura had covered her tracks. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger build inside me like a pressure valve about to explode. This wasn't just some drunken mistake, a lapse in judgment fueled by vacation euphoria. This was deliberate, calculated. She had planned for this. She had planned for him. For a brief moment, I thought about confronting her. I could call her right now, force her to explain herself, watch as she tried to lie her way out of it. But then I remembered the way she had been ignoring me, the way her friend had covered for her, the way she had left me here, alone, while she played house with another man. No, I wasn't going to give her the chance to spin this into something it wasn't. I wasn't going to fight her over the phone while she sat there, miles away, thinking she was still in control. I was going to wait. She had no idea what was coming. For now, I let the silence stretch between us. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't call her back. Let her wonder. Let her feel even the smallest fraction of the uncertainty she had forced upon me. The trip would be over soon, and when she came home, the life she had been trying so desperately to juggle was going to come crashing down around her. She had made her choice, and I was about to make mine. Laura's vacation was coming to an end, but for me, time had slowed to a crawl. Every day felt longer than the last, each moment filled with the sickening weight of what I now knew to be true. My wife, my faithful, loving wife, had spent her entire trip wrapped up in an affair, sneaking away to whisper into the phone with a man who wasn't me, making excuses, covering her tracks, while I sat at home like a fool, waiting for scraps of her attention. The realization of it had changed something in me. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't confused. I was done. I had stopped texting her, stopped calling. I let her wallow in the illusion that everything was fine, that I was still the clueless husband waiting patiently for her to return home. I didn't give her any reason to suspect that I knew. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to let her guard down completely before I tore it all apart. She sent me another message the following morning. Hey love, sorry I've been MIA. Just trying to soak up the last few days here before coming home. Can't wait to see you. I stared at the words, feeling nothing but disgust. Soak up the last few days. Was that what she called it? Spending the final hours of her vacation tangled up in another man's sheets? Kissing him like she had once kissed me? Telling him the same sweet lies she had once whispered into my ear? My stomach churned, but I forced myself to breathe through the anger. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not yet. I ignored her message. I wanted to see what she would do. A few hours later, she sent another. Are you okay? Haven't heard from you much. Miss you. She was testing the waters now, trying to gauge whether or not I had caught on to anything. I almost laughed at how predictable it was. She wanted reassurance. She wanted me to feed her the lie that I was still oblivious, that I was just busy, that nothing had changed. But I wasn't going to give her that comfort. I left the message unread. That night, I checked the phone records again. Another call to the same number. Nearly an hour long. I imagined her lying in bed, whispering to him in the dark, telling him things that should have belonged only to me. Was she making promises? Telling him she wished she could stay? Saying I love you? I shut my laptop and exhaled slowly. The anger was boiling beneath the surface now, hot and uncontrollable, but I forced myself to stay calm. The moment for confrontation was coming, and when it did, I wanted her to see everything. The proof, the betrayal, the cold, undeniable reality of what she had done. She had no idea that her perfect little world was already crumbling. The next day, she sent a final message. Flying home tomorrow. Can't wait to see you. And just like that, the clock was set. She was coming home. Back to our house, back to me, as if she hadn't spent the past 2 weeks giving herself to someone else. I wondered how she planned to act when she walked through the door. Would she throw her arms around me, kiss me like nothing had happened? Would she sit across from me at dinner, tell me about her trip, laugh, smile, lie, all while knowing exactly what she had done? She thought she was coming home to the same life she had left behind. She had no idea she was about to be thrown out of it. Laura was flying home the next day, and I had already decided exactly how this was going to end. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or listen to whatever pathetic excuses she would throw my way. She had made her choice, and I was going to make mine. She would walk into our home expecting the same life she had left behind, but instead, she was going to find herself stripped of everything she had taken for granted. But then, before I could even put my plan into action, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. I was sitting on the couch that evening, staring blankly at the TV, though I wasn't really watching it. My mind was somewhere else, running through every possible scenario of what the next day would bring. Would she fake enthusiasm? Would she pretend nothing had happened? Would she cry when she realized that she had lost everything? My hands clenched into fists just thinking about it. And then my phone rang. At first, I thought it was Laura, and for a split second, I considered ignoring it again. But when I looked at the screen, I saw a different name, Megan. One of Laura's friends. One of the women she had supposedly gone on this trip with. A strange feeling settled in my gut as I stared at the name. Megan and I weren't particularly close. We had been around each other plenty of times over the years, but she had never called me before, never had any reason to. The fact that she was reaching out to me now, the night before Laura came home, set off every alarm in my head. I answered. "Hey," she said, her voice hesitant. "I know this is really weird, and I wasn't sure if I should call, but I couldn't keep this to myself." I didn't say anything. I just let her speak. "It's about Laura," she continued, her voice lower now, like she didn't want someone to overhear. "I don't know what she's told you about this trip, but I need to be honest with you. She hasn't been with us this whole time." My grip tightened around the phone, my chest constricting. I already knew what was coming, but hearing it out loud sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "She met someone here," Megan said, her voice almost apologetic, as if she felt guilty just for being the one to tell me. "I don't know how it started, but she's been with him the entire trip. We barely saw her after the first few days. And she's been lying to you, making excuses so she could be with him. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you deserved to know." I let out a slow breath, my fingers digging into my palm. I had already known, deep down. The phone records, the messages, the social media posts. Everything had pointed to this exact truth. But hearing it from someone who had actually been there, someone who had seen it happen, made it all the more real. "She's flying back tomorrow," Megan continued, "and I just couldn't let her walk back into your house and pretend like nothing happened. I don't know if she plans to tell you, but she won't." I cut in, my voice calm, controlled. "She was never going to tell me." There was a pause. Then, a quiet, "I'm really sorry." I almost laughed at that. Sorry? She wasn't the one who had spent the past 2 weeks betraying me. She wasn't the one who had thrown away years of marriage for a fling in another country. But I knew why she felt guilty. She had watched it happen and had stayed silent, until now. I thanked her for telling me, hung up, and sat in the silence of our home. It was strange, the way the rage that had been building inside me suddenly settled into something colder. This was it, the final confirmation, the last piece of proof that Laura had destroyed our marriage before she even stepped foot back in our house. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and looked around. Her clothes, her things, her presence. It all felt foreign now, like a stranger had been living here. I wasn't going to let her sully this home any longer. Tomorrow, she would come back expecting normalcy. Expecting me. Expecting us. Tomorrow, she would find nothing but the consequences of her choices. Laura's flight landed in the afternoon, and by early evening, she was on her way home. I knew this because she texted me before she boarded, a cheerful little message that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you. I missed you so much." As if the past 2 weeks had been nothing but a brief separation between two loving spouses, as if she hadn't spent every night tangled up in another man's arms, whispering the same words to him. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was about to get her answer soon enough. By the time she arrived, I had already done everything I needed to do. Her clothes, her shoes, her toiletries. Every trace of her existence in our home had been packed up into garbage bags and left outside the front door. Her wedding ring, the one I had given her all those years ago, sat on the kitchen counter, cold and meaningless now. And inside, there was nothing waiting for her but the truth. I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway, then the familiar shuffle of her suitcase wheels on the pavement. Then silence. She had seen the bags. She had seen what was waiting for her before she even set foot inside. I didn't move from where I sat in the living room. I didn't need to go to the door. A few moments later, I heard it open, heard her footsteps as she stepped inside cautiously, as if she already knew something was very, very wrong. James. Her voice was uncertain, hesitant, the first crack in the performance she had so carefully prepared. She was expecting warmth, a welcome home, maybe even guilt from me for not texting her as much while she was away. What she wasn't expecting was the ice-cold reality she had just walked into. She stepped further inside, and then she saw it. The wedding ring on the counter, the empty spaces where her things used to be. I didn't look at her at first. I just let the silence stretch between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, unshaken. Megan called me last night. I didn't need to say anything else. I watched as the color drained from Laura's face, as the realization hit her like a freight train. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew. She knew that I knew. That there were no more excuses, no more lies she could spin to salvage this. Get out, I said simply. Her eyes widened in panic. James, wait. Out. Her gaze darted to the bags outside, then back to me, and I could see it happening. The desperate scramble, the mental gymnastics, the pathetic last-minute attempt to salvage what she had so carelessly destroyed. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? I finally looked at her, and my voice was sharper now. Explain how you spent the last 2 weeks screwing another man while I sat at home like an idiot? Explain how you lied to my face over and over again? Explain how you chose this. I gestured toward the door. No, Laura. There's nothing left to explain. You made your decision. Now you get to live with it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not sympathy. Not sadness. Just emptiness. I was going to tell you, she whispered. I laughed. A short, hollow sound. Were you? When? After you unpacked? After you kissed me like nothing happened? After you climbed into our bed, into my arms, still carrying the stench of another man? Don't insult me, Laura. You were never going to tell me. You were going to keep this secret for as long as you could. She sobbed now, covering her mouth with her hand, as if she could somehow contain the breakdown that was unfolding right in front of me. But I wasn't moved. Not even slightly. You don't understand, she tried again. It was a mistake, I cut her off. No, it wasn't. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. A mistake is saying something stupid in an argument. Cheating on your husband for 2 weeks straight while ignoring his calls is not a mistake, Laura. It's a choice. And you made yours. Now get out of my house. Her face crumpled, but I was done. Done listening. Done caring. I stood up, walked past her without another word, and opened the front door. I didn't look at her as I stepped aside, leaving the path clear for her to leave. For a moment, she just stood there, as if she was still waiting for me to change my mind, to soften, to forgive. But she didn't realize something. I was already gone. I had loved her once. I had given her my trust, my devotion, my entire life. And she had thrown it all away. So I watched, silent and unmoved, as she finally picked up her bags with trembling hands and walked out of my life. I didn't wait to see if she looked back. I closed the door behind her. And just like that, it was over. The moment I closed the door behind Laura, an eerie silence settled over the house. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. But instead of loneliness, all I felt was relief. The weight I had been carrying for the past 2 weeks, the late-night doubts, the unanswered texts, the sinking feeling in my gut, was gone. I wasn't waiting for the truth anymore. I wasn't wondering, questioning, second-guessing. I knew. And now, so did she. I sat back down in the living room, staring at the wedding ring on the counter. The symbol of everything we had built together. Now nothing more than a discarded token of a life that no longer existed. I didn't feel pain when I looked at it. Not anymore. It was just an object, meaningless, just like the vows she had so easily broken. Then, the inevitable happened. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, and then again, in rapid succession. Laura. She hadn't even made it out of the driveway before she started trying to claw her way back in. Laura, please, just talk to me. Laura, I made a mistake. I swear it didn't mean anything. Please, don't do this. Laura, I love you. Please, can we talk? I let the messages pile up, unread and ignored. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she had been caught. She was sorry that her perfect little lie had come crashing down. If Megan hadn't called me, if I hadn't found out, Laura would have walked into our house with a smile, kissed me, unpacked her bags, and slipped right back into our life like nothing had happened. But now, she had lost control of the narrative, and she was desperate to get it back. The calls started next. First one, then another, each ringing out into silence. I could picture her in her car, frantically redialing, her hands shaking, panic setting in as she realized that I wasn't giving her what she wanted. When she finally gave up on calling, the voice messages started. The first was her crying. James, please. I don't even know where to go. Please talk to me. The second was her trying to explain. It wasn't what you think. It was stupid. It was meaningless. I just got caught up in the moment. The third was desperation. I'll do anything, James. Please don't throw this away. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. Please, I'll prove to you that this was just a mistake. I listened to every single one, letting her voice wash over me, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No sadness. No temptation to answer. She was right about one thing. It wasn't what I thought. It was worse. Because I had spent years believing in this woman, trusting her, building a life with her, and she had torn it all apart like it was nothing. A mistake? No. A mistake was a single moment of weakness. A mistake was something that happened once. What Laura had done was calculated. She had lied, deceived, ignored me, covered her tracks, and carried on with her affair for weeks. And now she wanted forgiveness? Now she wanted to pretend it didn't mean anything? She had her chance, and she had thrown it away. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and picked up the wedding ring. It felt cold against my skin, unfamiliar. Without hesitation, I walked to the trash can, lifted the lid, and let it fall in with a dull, lifeless clink. Then, I blocked her number. I had heard enough. The moment I blocked Laura's number, it was as if a door had finally closed inside me. I expected to feel something, anger, sorrow, regret, but all I felt was free. The weight of betrayal, the suffocating doubt, the endless waiting for an explanation that would never be enough. It was all gone. Laura had made her choice, and now I had made mine. I spent the next few hours in silence, just sitting in the house that had once been ours, but was now mine alone. I expected it to feel empty, but instead, it felt cleansed, as if her absence had wiped away the rot that had been spreading beneath the surface for longer than I had realized. Every corner of the house, every picture on the wall, every little trace of our life together. It all felt different now, stripped of the meaning it once held. But I wasn't going to let this place be a shrine to a broken marriage. I refused to let her stain linger any longer than necessary. The next morning, I started making changes. The bed we had shared? Gone. The framed photos of us? Packed away. Her favorite coffee mug, the shampoo she left in the shower, the perfume bottle on the dresser? All thrown out. I wanted no remnants of her in my home, no reminders of the woman who had betrayed me. The messages started coming in from mutual friends soon after. Some had already heard. Megan must have spread the news faster than I expected. A few offered their support, while others tried to play peacemaker. Maybe you should hear her out. She made a mistake, but does it really have to end like this? You guys were so good together. Are you sure you can't fix it? I ignored them all. What was there to fix? She hadn't tripped and accidentally fallen into another man's arms. She had chosen to lie, to cheat, to destroy our marriage without a second thought. There was no fixing that. A few days later, my lawyer drafted the divorce papers. I had told him I wanted no negotiations, no discussions. She wasn't getting a second chance, and she wasn't getting a damn thing from me beyond what the law required. When the papers were ready, I had them delivered to her sister's house, where I assumed she was staying, since she no longer had a place here. She tried to call me from another number after that. I let it ring. Then came the email. James, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I just need you to know how sorry I am. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I hate myself for it. I can't take it back, but I will regret it for the rest of my life. I still love you. I will always love you. And I wish I could go back and undo everything. Please, just talk to me. Please don't let this be how we end. I read it once, then deleted it without replying. There was nothing left to say. The weeks passed, and with every day that went by, I felt lighter. The pain wasn't instant. It didn't disappear overnight, but it dulled, faded, until one day, I woke up and realized that she was just a memory now. She was no longer my wife, no longer my problem, just a chapter of my life that had closed, never to be reopened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt good. Laura had burned everything to the ground, but I had walked away from the ashes untouched, and I wasn't looking back. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I was moving on, without her.